Colonel David Hackworth, probably the most decorated man in United States military history. Winner of 75 medals, including 2 Distinguished Service Crosses, 10 Silver Stars, and 8 Purple Hearts. After 25 years of service, he is quitting the U.S. Army in disgust over the tactics of our military leaders, the South Vietnamese Army, and the entire Vietnamization program. He served 5 years in Vietnam as a combat leader of American troops and as an advisor to the South Vietnamese Army. He's worked on high-level Army study groups at the Pentagon and in 1968 prepared a private report to General Westmoreland on the Vietnam War. He is 40 years of age. The American Broadcasting Company brings you the award-winning interview program, Issues and Answers. Our guest, Colonel David Hackworth, was interviewed in the Mekong Delta of South Vietnam in April, with the understanding that the Colonel's comments would not be released until now. The following statements are excerpted from a 3-hour exclusive conversation with ABC News correspondent Howard Tuckner.
You've served in Korea, you've served in Vietnam for a long time, you've served back at the Pentagon. How do you rate the training of U.S. Army troops who came to Vietnam?
I think in the main, the training for Vietnam from the standpoint of the individual soldier, the young officer, and even the battalion and brigade and division staff officers and senior commanders has been totally inadequate. I think that our training was geared to the individual replacement system of World War II. The curriculum was wrong. The quality of the instructors and the leaders was in my judgment, we didn't have the type people that should have been there. The commanders there should have been, the battalion commanders should have commanded battalions in Vietnam. The company commanders should have commanded companies here. And the leaders should have been the finest leaders our country could have mustered to provide the young soldiers with the type training, the realistic training that they needed to confront a guerrilla enemy in Vietnam. And I'd like to just make the point that when my well-trained STRAC, one of the finest units in the U.S. Army, arrived in Vietnam in June and July of 1965, the mistakes they made were criminal. The number of dead that they had killed among themselves, men that were shot by their comrades, artillery that had fallen on them. Great mistakes were made because of improper training, being not prepared for the war, even though we had from 1953 to 1965 to prepare for the war.
In your view, did poor training lead to higher casualties in Vietnam?
I'm convinced of it. I think that our casualties were at least 30% higher because of, or even higher than that, but I'd say just safely 30% higher because of troops that were not properly trained. I participated in a study group in the Pentagon in 67 and early 68, which considered U.S. casualties caused by friendly fires. And the group was composed of highly experienced personnel that had served in Vietnam. And it was our conclusion that 15 to 20% of the casualties caused in Vietnam were the result of friendly fires. One man shooting another man. Artillery, friendly artillery firing on a friendly element. Friendly helicopters firing on a friendly unit. TAC air striking a friendly unit. And I could count you, in my own case, countless personal examples. For example, during the Battle of Dak To in June of 17th, a rocket ship came into my A Company's position by mistake and released its rockets right on top of the company, killing the executive officer and wounding 29 other troopers. I can recall in September of 1965, as my battalion was deployed, artillery was fired in the wrong place, killing 7 men in one of my platoons.
Can it be said that the generals in the U.S. Army, many of them, did not really adjust to the tactics of this war?
I think the average general that came to Vietnam did not have a good concept, good appreciation of the nature of guerrilla warfare. In most cases, because of their lack of even reading in depth about guerrilla warfare, they were not prepared for the war, and they had to fall back on Korea and World War II, and they used the thought process and the techniques that worked successfully there, moving in large formations, making battalion and brigade air mobile assaults on a small LZ, and having everything very tidy, artillery in position, and fighting much as we did on the plains of Europe. I don't feel that too many division commanders or even separate brigade commanders really understood the name of the game.
Did this mean more U.S. casualties, this misunderstanding of the name of the game, as you put it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think probably one of the most classic examples is Hamburger Hill. Here was a hill. It had to be taken. Hundreds of casualties occurred taking this hill. They had the hill for a few days, the Americans did, and pulled off. So what was the point of taking the hill? Why not stand back if the enemy's on it, bomb him? But why use infantry to take the hill?
Did the upper echelon of the Army really ever become changed on this war? Did they learn from their mistakes?
I don't think so. I don't think that the top level ever developed a realistic strategic plan, nor did they ever have tactics to support that strategic plan.
Why?
I think that the top managers of the Army, and there's a big difference between a leader, a combat leader, and a manager. The top managers were so involved in systems analysts, in the normal bureaucracy of it all, that they were fighting from day to day just to move the paper that crossed their desk, and they couldn't see the forest from the trees. In February, when we went into Laos conventionally. Well, the idea was to block the enemy's supply routes. So we dropped in there. The Vietnamese paid a horrible price. Tremendous mistakes were made. Again, conventional thinking. Conventional thinking put us into that operation rather than having a light, mobile guerrilla force, but a guerrilla force that belonged to the government of Vietnam or the American Army operating in there like guerrillas. It takes a thief to catch a thief. And what we need is a thief. We don't need a conventionally trained FBI agent dashing through the woods with a large force behind him. We need small people, well-trained, highly motivated. And this is what we've not had. Because what we have now among the Army is a bunch of shallow dilettantes who run from pillar to post trying to punch their card, serving minimum time at company level because the exposure, you're very close to the heat of the furnace there, meaning you can get in trouble easily.
Have you found that many other U.S. Army officers who have been here in Vietnam feel the way you do?
Most of my young friends, that would be captains, majors, and lieutenant colonels, who have a considerable amount of experience in Vietnam, feel as I do. A number of very highly qualified full colonels whom I know feel as I do. And I would suppose there are a few generals who feel as I do. But in the main, this group, unfortunately, I suppose it's because of the nature of the beast, is not highly vocal regarding their views. Because if one would become highly vocal, you might become a Billy Mitchell. It might be the end of your career.
Hasn't this silence meant that some who have died in this war might have been saved?
That's right. And that's why perhaps we who have not been vocal should be charged for just criminal neglect. Because it's our obligation, it's our responsibility, not only to train our soldiers well, to lead our soldiers well, but to make sure that there are no mistakes made, that they're protected as well as possible from mistakes and error. And once you make mistakes, they must be surfaced, critiqued, identified, and remedial action taken.
The United States of America. It runs on oil, and boy, does it take a lot to keep it running. 3 gallons a day for every man, woman, and child in this country, even weekends. Because 75% of all our energy comes from oil and natural gas. Oil for transportation and industrialization. For turbines, for cars and trains. For the trucks, the planes that take us to homes fueled by gas and oil. Oil for paints and paving and baking. Even for wrapping the bread we bake. For medicines and matches, telephones and textiles, we need more oil. That's our job, to drill for more, to meet your demand for more oil products. We're the oil companies of America, working to keep this country working. Because a country that runs on oil can't afford to run short.
Colonel, I understand that because of the fact that you're considered one of the best infantry officers in the Army, you've been asked a number of times to go to the War College, which is preparation for becoming general one day.
Yes, I've been asked to go to War College for 3 years straight, and I refused for 3 years straight. And my reason for refusing is I just simply felt that we were on the battlefield, we were engaged in a critical battle, and I didn't need to go to school at the time to learn anything. I was learning it on the battlefield, and I was transferring the skills that I had to my men and probably saving lives. I can recall in November of 1969, a major general here in Vietnam told me that when I asked him, should I extend again, he said, "Hack, get out. The war for the U.S. Army is over with in Vietnam." He said, "You've got all the right tickets and all the right credentials. Go on to War College now and prepare yourself for bigger things."
Colonel, we've heard a lot about body count in this war. What about it?
Well, it's been used as a rule of measurement of success. The body count has cost us a lot. It's cost us unnecessary casualties because always in the chain of command, the one commander is pressuring the other commander for what is the success, what is the body count. So it ends up you're calling the platoon leader, how many have you killed? The platoon leader's in a firefight and he doesn't have a clue of how many he's killed. But he may have to stop the fight. He may have to expose a few soldiers to go out and count the bodies. During the fight, he may lose the momentum of the attack to stay on the enemy and pursue him while he's counting bodies. He may have to squat on the enemy and count the bodies. It's also really weakened the moral fiber of the officer corps because it's taught them to lie. It's taught them to exaggerate because, again, it's a form of success. It's how many touchdowns do you have? What's the final score of the game? And the body count has been greatly exaggerated as a result of this. And I would say it's been exaggerated to the tune of 20 to 25%.
Do you know of any example specifically where you were involved in trying to substantiate a body count that you didn't think was accurate?
Yes. I could give several good examples. One which comes to mind is a battle which was fought with a great number of friendly maneuver elements, reputedly found an enemy force. We encircled the enemy force all night long. Artillery, rockets, fighter bombers were placed on the enemy force, and came the dawn when we swept the enemy positions. There was a total of enemy dead on the battlefield of not more than 20. When I crossed over to the other side of the canal that we were fighting on to talk to the commander of the other battalion, which was the other half of the encirclement force, the brigade commander came in and started talking about such a brilliant victory we had, and that we killed something like 275 or 280 enemy dead. And this was a classic battle. It illustrated the techniques of mobile warfare, how we could drop on an enemy force, find him, fix him, surround him, and then destroy him. And I pointed out to the brigade commander, the acting brigade commander, I should say, that there wasn't that many dead on the battlefield. We'd only killed, I'd seen no more than 12 or 15, and the colonel on the other side had told me he had 6 or 7, so there couldn't be more than 20, 22 or so. And I was told that there were 280 killed, and this is what had been reported to division. And I said, well, it's not right. We only had, this battalion is reported to have a strength of 300, and if we killed 280, that would leave less than 20 able-bodied men able to remove the bodies from the battlefield, which is a normal VC technique, which was his excuse for why the bodies weren't on the battlefield. He said, well, that night the survivors carried them off. I said, look, we had the enemy completely surrounded. There was no corridor in which he could escape. If there were a small path that he could have gained escape through our lines, that would have meant that every survivor would have had to carry 7 or 8 bodies, plus all their individual weapons. There were, I think, 5 total individual weapons found on the battlefield. And this complete battle was a total lie, in my judgment. I was called in by the commander at the time to endorse his after-action report, this report, which had all of these bodies in it, and great other irregularities and falsehoods, I think designed to make this individual look like Rommel or look like some great tactician and a very, very effective combat leader. And I refused to do it. And he and I had somewhat of a major confrontation. Also during this time I was asked to sign a statement, a narrative statement to support an award for the Distinguished Service Cross for this individual who didn't even get out of his helicopter during the, quote, battle, and I refused to do that. It was insinuated if I would sign 1 or 2 of these documents that I would be, my unit would be considered possibly for a unit citation as a result of this action, which I, of course, refused to go along with.
Did you sign it?
Absolutely not.
When leading U.S. government officials, people like former Secretary of Defense McNamara, come to Vietnam for a visit, do they get the clear, straight picture?
I think what we do for a presentation for a senior official such as Mr. McNamara is put on a razzle-dazzle briefing, complete with charts and extremely well-rehearsed briefing officers, and we try to put our best foot forward. We try to look as good as possible. Perhaps the scenario would go kind of like this. After the briefing, Mr. McNamara turned to General Wheeler, who was with him, or to General Westmoreland, who I would think accompanied him, and said, what do you think about that? And General Wheeler said, great battle, we're knocking them dead. And General Westmoreland would have said, we really got them that time. This is a typical action in Vietnam of your U.S. Modern Army in action. We've really nailed them, and that's the way we're nailing them. That's why we're winning this war. Just give us a few more troops, a few more resources, and we'll have them on the run. There's light at the end of the tunnel. He didn't say a VC was holding a candle. He said, but the end is in sight. So as a consequence, Mr. McNamara, believing this perhaps, because it looked real enough to believe, went back, and he's sitting, again, part of the scenario, with the president. And Mr. Johnson says, how's it going in Vietnam? And McNamara says, we're winning.
Colonel, in 1968, you were so highly thought of that you were selected from a group of a few officers to contribute a report to General Westmoreland. What did you say in that report?
Well, my comments were very exciting insofar as the Army staff was concerned, but I felt they were truthful. And I said that, in my judgment, at the time of the paper that this paper was written, 1968, the U.S. Army had badly botched the war in Vietnam, and I'd considered, from a tactical standpoint, we had lost the war. And now my experience 3 years later only confirms those comments to General Westmoreland.
What's happened since then? Has there been any change? Have your comments helped anything?
No, I don't think so. I said that I felt that there had been no viable reforms. I felt that the the corruption that exists in Vietnam, the graft, the failure to produce continues to exist. I felt that the military had not established any strategic goals, nor had there been any tactical concepts developed to support the strategic goals which were not developed and announced. I felt that we sent an army to Vietnam that was not prepared to fight the war. We sent an army that was top-heavy in administrators and logisticians and bloody thin in fighters, not trained for the war. I felt that we didn't understand the nature of the war in the military. I felt that just everything we had done in Vietnam had been done wrong.
One of these days, turn that train around, go back to my hometown.
You know those old railroad songs. They're still singing them. But those old railroads, they've changed. Today's railroads are bigger, faster, more powerful. They haul more goods to you at low cost than all the trucks, airplanes, and barges put together. Helping them do the job, the 1 billion Americans who work with the railroad industry. They know who needs America's railroads. They do. You do. We all do.
In our nation's capital is the largest and most modern crime detection organization in the world, with facilities for constant training of agents. Thousands of dedicated men and women process, collate, classify, and file every fragment of criminal evidence. This is the FBI. Each week, we bring you a story of the unceasing war against the greedy and vicious forces that wage war against you. In this war, there can be no truce. In this war, there can be no ceasefire.
They've started a test flooding of all the feeder outlets.
Let's go after them.
Defending you are the men of the FBI.
This is the FBI. Come out with your hands in the air.
I'm Ephraim Zimbalist, inviting you to join Philip Abbott, William Reynolds, and me every week on the FBI.
Federal agents investigate the theft of secret data from a research company on the FBI tonight on ABC.
Do you think it's possible, Colonel, that past United States presidents who have been involved during the Vietnam War, present administration, do you think it's possible that they may feel they're getting the straight truth, but that it might not be?
Well, my thing is infantry, and which I'm very familiar with, and I don't know what happens at the higher echelons. I know the nature of the beast in the military is to sanitize the report to look good. I've seen what's happened at brigade level, where the whole situation has been distorted. And I think it's highly probable that all of these beautiful briefings and excellent reports were so production line Hollywoodized that by the time they got to the president and they got to the people who were making decisions, they didn't have the real facts. They didn't understand what was happening.
Colonel, what do you think of the Vietnamization program? Is it viable now?
Well, my view of Vietnamization is it's a nice word. I think that it's been glamorized. I think that it's been Madison Avenued. I think that it's perhaps a PR's dream. It's a public relations gimmick. I've been with the Vietnamese a long time, and I've seen great improvement, significant improvement. But I haven't seen the improvement that I read about in many papers, many papers and different magazines, and I hear leading statesmen of our nation say, I don't think the Vietnamese are that good. I don't think the whole Vietnamization thing is real.
If the enemy chose to react and if American troops were not here, what do you think would happen to the Vietnamese army?
I think if the enemy had the capability of launching a concerted attack, I would think we'd find ourselves in a situation as we were in 63, 64, and early 65. Really, the cause of the American involvement here was to save the shattered Vietnamese army. We were losing on the average of, as I recall, of almost a battalion of Vietnamese a week in 65. And I think we'd find the same situation developing. If the North Vietnamese, who I feel had the capability, they certainly proved that they were pretty dangerous and tough up in Laos, and we find that we recently made a foray into Cambodia, and the enemy is much hotter in Cambodia. Last April, the targets we were striking along my zone in Cambodia were taking candy from a baby. Now you go to Cambodia and you find the enemy with his stuff together. He's tough. He's moving back into the areas that we used to raid with ease, and I think we're going to find it more and more difficult of making these raids into Cambodia.
Do you think that the programs that the U.S. military and perhaps the U.S. mission had here did not fit the situation for Vietnamization?
Exactly. We gave them a sheet of music designed by the military, and that's what they had to dance by. And the whole organization of the Vietnamese army, in my judgment, has been wrong. It's not been tailored or designed to fight the guerrilla in this type warfare. And we've given them a lot of sophisticated equipment, helicopters, sensor devices, radars, complicated vehicles, other complicated equipment that the Vietnamese are just incapable of using, incapable of maintaining. So we've given them now all kinds of sophisticated junk and asked them to use this, Vietnamization. Now, we'll suddenly win the war because the Vietnamese have helicopters. We'll suddenly win the war because the Vietnamese have the M16 rifle. But it takes a lot more than a piece of equipment or a complicated piece of equipment, such as radar and sensors and so on, for them to win the war. Instead of saying, what you need is well-trained soldiers. What you need is highly motivated soldiers. What you need is soldiers who are similar to the Viet Cong soldiers, who are fighting for an ideal, who are fighting something similar to Christianity, who are fighting for a cause, a crusade, not fighting for to get a Honda or get a new watch or to get a portable radio or to have a nice house, but fighting for a cause. And this is what's not been inculcated in the whole army of Vietnam.
Colonel, do you feel it's possible that you've become too emotionally involved in Vietnam?
I become emotionally involved in Vietnam, and one couldn't have spent the number of years that I've spent in Vietnam without becoming emotionally involved. One couldn't see the number of young studs die or be terribly wounded without becoming emotionally involved. I just have seen the American nation spend so much of its wonderful, great young men in this country. I've seen our national wealth being drained away. I see the nation being split apart and almost being split asunder because of this war. And I'm wondering to what end it's all going to lead to.
Our guest on Issues and Answers was Colonel David Hackworth, interviewed by ABC correspondent Howard Tuckner in Vietnam.